Yo, rockers and rollers, priests and stoners. Welcome to the Music Makers History Channel. I'm Nick Brody, the rock and roll roadie, coming at you with killer stories about the legends, their gear, and the jaw-dropping tales that is the history of rock and roll. Today, from our Music Maker Gearography series, I'm going to tell the story about the roar of rock, the history of Marshall guitar amps. Let's jump right in. Back in the swinging 60s, rock and roll was about to crank up to 11, and right in the thick of it was a little drum shop in London run by the legendary James Charles Marshall, a.k.a. Jim Marshall. This cat wasn't just selling kits. He was laying down the groundwork for the future of loud. A solid drummer and teacher, Jim had a steady gig selling gear to up-and-comers, but it was the hot-shot guitar slingers, cats like Pete Townsend and Richie Blackmore, who sparked the fire that would become Marshall amplification. Guitarists were on the prowl for an amp that packed more punch and grit than the soft-sounding American rigs. Enter Jim Marshall and his electronics whiz, Ken Brand. In 1962, they rolled out the first bad boy in the lineup, JT M45. Inspired by the Fender Bassman but tweaked to bring the heat, this amp spat out a thick, snarling tone that made British rockers go wild. That warm, sustained, and dirty growl, it was a match made in rock heaven. As rockers pushed the limits, so did the volume. The Who's own Pete Townsend wanted a beast that could shake arenas to their core. Jim and his crew delivered the goods with a 100-watt head and a 4x12 cab, the now iconic Marshall stack. That monster rig didn't just get loud, it defined the very sound of rock for generations. By the late 60s and 70s, if you weren't rocking a Marshall, were you even in the game? Jimi Hendrix melted minds with his wall of Marshalls. Clapton laid down blues-soaked riffs, and Jimmy Page cranked out legendary licks. Hard rock and metal took the torch and ran with it. Deep Purple, AC/DC, and later Jeff Beck, Gary Moore, and Eddie Van Halen all used Marshalls to deliver their skull-crushing sound. Rock kept evolving, and Marshall wasn't about to get left in the dust. The 70s brought the Master Volume series, letting players get that screaming high-gain tone without blowing the roof off. Then came the 80s, and with it the mighty JCM 800, a fire-breathing amp loved by metal titans like Slash, Kerry King, Tom Morello, and Zakk Wylde. If you wanted face-melting distortion and searing solos, this was the amp to plug into. Fast forward to today, and Marshall is still the heavyweight champ. They've dropped some digital magic into their lineup, but they haven't lost sight of their roots. Whether you're ripping it up in a dive bar or blowing minds in a stadium, that classic Marshall logo still stands for raw power, grit, and unfiltered rock and roll fury. What's your favorite Marshall amp? Let me know in the comments. Jim Marshall died on April 5th, 2012. My birthday in Milton Keynes in the UK at the age of 88.
Now, he was known as the father of loud. Jim Marshall, the man who helped shape the sound of rock, has died at the age of 88. He pioneered the guitar amplifiers that were introduced in the 1960s and used by some of the greatest names in rock, as Nick Hiwatt now reports.
Jimi Hendrix, just one of the legendary rock guitarists who swore by the Marshall amp. So did Eric Clapton, so did Van Halen, and so too did Nigel Tufnell of Spinal Tap, though his were better than anybody else's.
The numbers all go to 11. Look, right across the board. 11, 11,
and most of
11,
the amps go up to 10.
Exactly.
Does that mean it's louder? Is it any louder?
Well, it's one louder.
As for Pete Townsend of The Who, he used to destroy his on stage. Or so it seemed.
Pete was very clever, actually. As far as smashing up the cabinets were concerned, he only used to tear the speaker fret, you know, the cloth on the front of the speakers. So he never damaged the speaker, just tore it. We used to have them back regularly to just put a new speaker fret on.
Jim Marshall was the man who put the raw power into the world's noisiest art form. His first amp was designed in 1962 to produce what he called a dirtier sound than others then on the market. At his Milton Keynes factory, he produced thousands of amps a week. The secret? Old-fashioned valves made in Russia. You'll find Marshall amps wherever rock music's played. To those who said they were just too loud, he said he'd never met a deaf guitarist. And they're still popular with the latest generation of musicians.
Everybody who's picked up an electric guitar has at least one point in time plugged into a Marshall amp, and it's the sound of rock. You know, it's like it's been synonymous with rock and roll and heavier music, but they can get very bluesy as well. I mean, I'm a blues guitar player, and I've used them for years.
He helped shape rock music, ran a successful business, and gave millions to charity. Tonight, Jim Marshall's colleagues said he'd gone to a better place, which had just got a whole lot louder.
The father of loud's legacy? Rock and roll is still screaming through Marshall stacks around the world. From amateurs to pros to guitar gods alike, Marshall amps didn't just make music louder. They gave it bite, swagger, and the balls-to-the-wall attitude that makes rock and roll immortal. Jim Marshall, the father of Loud Your Vision, gave rock its roar, your name etched in every chord, the sound of rebellion, the power of dreams, forever echoing through amplifiers and screams. Rest in power, Jim. The world still plays on. If you like this video, please smash that subscribe button. Give me a like, drop a comment, and share this with your crew. And don't forget to hit that notification bell so you'll know every time we drop a new episode. Help a roadie out until the needle drops again. Nick Brody, Rock and Roll Roadie, out. If you like this video, here's another one for you to check out.